tonight's episode, we are going to be talking about trauma. So really interesting topic that we've been studying at church. And there's been so much that has been coming out, from the woodworks.
It sounded like skeletons coming out of the closet for a second, which is true.
There's been some skeletons coming out of the closet. So it's been quite a season of just learning and rediscovering ourselves and our traumas.
And also how to work on them and how to not allow them, to have an impact in our day-to-day lives, relationships with the people that we kind of interact with and encounter.
So for those of you who might not know what trauma means, or what
trauma is scientific. Here we go. Come on.
Well, trauma happens when somebody goes through an event that compromises your safety. So that could be an emotional thing, that could be a physical thing, it could be a psychological thing, but there's something that happens that compromises your safety.
That's well put, actually. That's pretty good, Bethel. Well done.
And it then leaves a mark or a memory.
Not me.
Not a physical mark.
Not a mark.
On you, and can cause you to have difficulty regulating your emotions. It can cause flashbacks. It can cause internal subconscious responses that you actually might not even be aware that you're having, especially if you haven't journaled. Just that's a joke.
Do you journal?
Especially if you haven't had a chance to process what's happened and to make sense of it all.
And the other part of it is the impact that it can have on you, just being free to be yourself, or allowing yourself to be yourself, and actually to experience life at the highest level. And by highest level, we mean just being authentic, having genuine relationships that are actually molding and shaping you and helping you grow, and also for you to experience the best of life, and that there's joy out there to be had.
Definitely. It takes me back to, well, even now, I think there's certain things in my behavior that are linked to past traumas.
Well, for example, Bethel, can you just make me a cup of tea, please? Yeah, just tea, because you're in the kitchen, aren't you? Do you mind just bringing me a cup of tea, please?
Why do you want me to make a cup of tea?
Because I'm just asking. Is that okay? I was only just asking because you're going downstairs, right, to make tea.
Why can't you make your own tea?
I can, and I always make my own tea. I mean, hang on, what's going on?
Why are you asking?
No, I'm only asking for a cup of tea.
Are you trying to control me?
Huh?
I mean, are you trying to do this whole African man thing?
Control you? What on earth are you talking about?
Seriously, why can't you just make your own tea? It doesn't make sense. Like, why? Just because I'm your wife now doesn't mean I have to get up and make you tea whenever you ask me to make you tea.
Well, wait. Let's just go back a bit, because I've only just asked for a cup of tea. It's not linked to anything else, but just a cup of tea.
Yeah.
And we're talking not even 250 milliliters. We're only talking about,
Yeah.
It's about that.
Whatever. I think you can make your own tea.
So let's just rewind and unpick that, because there's something clearly happening over here that I'm unaware of over here. So Bethel, can you walk me through? So obviously here I am just asking, Bethel, please make me a cup of tea. Where did that take you? If you've got a picture for me, can you draw that picture for me so I can kind of...
The thing is, right, this is the thing about some of my trauma responses. Sometimes I don't even know that I'm responding to trauma. It just happens. I just get this feeling of rage, or why the outrage of him doing that? Why would he ask me for a cup of tea? That's ridiculous. That's so controlling. Those are the irrational thoughts that come to my mind. And sometimes I don't even know why I'm having those thoughts. And then I start thinking things like, oh, he's just like one of those African men who's going to control me.
Oh, by the way, that's a massive generalization, because we do know worldwide this is a problem. So obviously Bethel has this generalization which just links down to...
But where does it come from? Where does that statement even come from?
That needs kind of
unpicking, because that statement comes from a trauma response, right? So in my brain, I've got, you've married an African man who's going to control you, because that's what I was told. If you've watched our videos on our multicultural marriage and how intercultural marriage and how people were not happy that we were getting married, you will know that people will tell me all kinds of things about Mark, and because he was a black man, that he's going to control me and he's going to do all of these things, and I'm going to have to do bombera, and I'm going to have to bring the dish, and I'm going to have to do all the stuff, right?
So just to put it all into perspective, this is the moment that Bethel's been prepared for when I just asked for a cup of tea. And all of a sudden, her mind goes back to that space.
Now, this is what they were talking about bringing the dish.
Tea in a dish. I mean, that'll be one odd recipe.
But here's the thing. So it's like, then Mark, in his Mark way, so patient and calm, he's like, okay, so talk to me about where this is coming from then. Let's go back. Let's think about it. And I'm like, yeah, because I feel like when you're asking me for the cup of tea, I feel like you're trying to control me.
Because bear in mind, I've only asked for a cup of tea. I haven't actually asked her to go anywhere. You know, we're in the same space. She's only going to make a cup of tea. And I think you were already going to make a cup of tea.
I was in the kitchen. We were in the kitchen at that time when it really happened. And
so we're talking, I don't know, like not even 5 meters.
No, I know.
And just flicking the kettle on and then, getting the cup. But yeah. So.
Yeah, I think it was good that you actually allowed me to explore what was going on for me in that moment, because most couples would just end up having a fight, really. And it could have ended up in an explosion of like, what? I can't, but you were really, what's the word? Inquisitive?
Professional curiosity.
Professional curiosity, right? Instead of just being like,
oh
my gosh, my wife just disrespected me. She just told me to make my own cup of tea. Like,
I didn't feel disrespected in any way. I think it's just
odd.
Well, I was just curious. What odd behaviour is this? Like, over a cup of tea. I mean, if I'd asked you something more serious, and I totally understand, but I just asked for a cup of tea, which I don't normally ask for anyway. For the most part, I tend to do my own stuff because that's how I grew up. Just, get on with it. If you need to do something, go do it yourself. I thought it'd be interesting to ask Bethel, because why not? And then I got that response, and I was like, ooh, tell me more.
Easy now.
Easy now.
I'm gonna get thirsty. So right then, if you've watched our videos on managing emotions, you would know my childhood wasn't that easy. And
by the way, I've also got my own traumas. This is not about Bethel.
No, we'll go into the marked traumas when we're going to genograms. Stay tuned, guys.
Stay tuned.
And yeah, so if you've watched the videos on managing emotions, I sometimes find it difficult to regulate my emotions because of growing up in a traumatic environment with domestic abuse and power and control struggles, right? So like when he asked me for a cup of tea, it's taking me back to all of these controlling situations that happened throughout my childhood and then into my teenagehood, not from parents, but from different relationships that I've experienced, where people would be controlling. So now I'm taking that experience and I'm transferring it into this relationship. And transference is a huge thing as well. That's an additional thing that links to trauma. It's like sometimes you've had trauma from something else and then you transfer that to this new relationship. And it's like, actually, he's perfectly in his right place to ask me for a cup of tea. Like, there's no harm in him asking me for a cup of tea.
Absolutely. I mean, as you're talking, I'm thinking about systemic theory because,
Mark's not a duty.
And thinking about power and control, and then thinking about that dynamic of, here's a situation where for you, it's, oh my goodness, it's happening. I'm losing the power and all of a sudden I'm being controlled, oppressive, or oppression, so to speak. And on my world, it's just, well, actually, I'm thinking about connection. I'm thinking about how can we build on this idea of, we're now working together and we can share these experiences of, I can make a cup of tea, you can make me a cup of tea. But in that moment, it's like, no, actually, I want the power back. Because if I give you all the power, then what's going to happen next? You're going to ask me for something.
Do something
what
else are you going to ask me?
Yeah, exactly.
Clean my shoes.
Yeah, exactly.
Polish my shoes as I get home.
Yeah. And so Beth was like, what on earth?
Like,
How dare
let's
you ask
stop
me for a
this
cup of
right
tea?
here.
Yeah, I know.
Like, that's the
In the
limit.
bus.
Let's not even go there.
So,
That's hilarious.
yeah, so you were going through this experience of like, oh my goodness. But what was, I don't know, in having that conversation, because I'm trying to remember whether you were able to just kind of talk. Did you have to filter through your feelings, your emotions, and kind of like your,
I think it's been a journey. I mean,
yeah.
we've been nearly married for 13 years, and it's been a journey of trying to figure out what is the trauma speaking and the response to trauma, and what is you just, asking me to do something. So when you ask me to do something, I think now I'm able to say, Bethel, that's an irrational thought. That's coming from trauma.
Yeah.
Mark is not trying to be controlling. He's just asking you to do something for him, and it's perfectly fine. I think more so this year, I've actually really, relinquished control quite a lot this year. It's been a journey.
But hang on, I think this is quite interesting because you said relinquish.
Yeah. Like, so control in the sense
because it's as if there's this tug of war.
Yeah.
Of like, I should have the control. No, I've got the control. No, actually, I want the,
But the thing is, it's not even control over you.
But so
it's control over me. This sounds deep, right, guys? So this is the thing. Like, while you're watching this, just try to think about things or maybe responses that you've had, right? That you're thinking, why did I respond like that? And then think, is it linked to something I've been through or something I've gone through, a traumatic event, which is causing me to react irrationally in this situation? And for me, it's been a whole long journey. But I think ever since the doctor came, and there's been that change, and we talked about that health and all that in the physical. But this psychologically has been a journey for me as well, having had Rhea as well. I've relinquished the control of my life, because one of the things that I have been known for is being a bit of a control freak, right? If you know me, I'm a perfectionist in my work. Anything I do it to 100%, and that's all about control.
So we're not talking about you, right?
Yeah.
Spot on.
In some things, it's really good. Like, in some things, being a perfectionist makes you excel. I
think when you read about some of them, that's the idea. You get that everything's perfect, and so I would imagine you must be some sort of a perfectionist with all of that wisdom.
Who knows? But then there's the element of control when you take it a little bit too far, and it's like, well, actually, I need to control every single thing that's in my parameters. I need to control the time I wake up. I need to control the time I shower, the time I go for a run, the time I do this,
and everybody else's
time, so that it doesn't interfere with my time. And that's how I've kind of been in this relationship. And I know a few times you've pointed it out to me when I've been like, literally, I'd say things like, are you going in the toilet? I'm going in the toilet. You can't go in the toilet.
And it's like, huh?
Like, what?
Sorry, what are you talking about? The toilet's free. No, I'm going. Okay. Do you mean you're asking, or you demanding?
Well, I'm demanding. I go into the toilet at 7:15 because I need to leave by this time. And it's like, literally everything's mapped out and makes logical sense. But it's very irrational, right? It's extremely irrational. And especially when you're in a marriage that doesn't make any sense. It's like, what? So you control the bathroom now?
So how does that play? Because this might be a little bit controversial for some people, because obviously I'd imagine, because you're talking about power and control, and there's this idea of submission within the gospel. Was it internal conflict, or was it just a case of like, actually, is this what submission looks like? Are you trying to get me to submit? Or I don't know.
You see, that's the thing. A lot of people think submission, well, not everybody, but some people misinterpret what submission is, right? From the male perspective. So before I was married to Mark, a lot of people would talk to me about, when you get married, you pretty much be your husband's servant. And that's how it was described to me, right?
And by the way, I did not want to marry a servant. I don't truly love that. Well, for me anyway, it's not coming that form, but anyway.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, I don't have any problem serving you, as in cooking.
I asked for a cup of tea. What are you talking
That
about?
was the first year, okay? I was coming from some serious trauma. But
I don't mind serving you.
I
Hey,
think
can I have a cup of tea? No, get that on your own.
it was more like, I don't mind serving you when I feel like serving you. That's how it was, right? That's the thing. I didn't want to be forced to serve you. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
and I was very afraid of getting into a marriage that was going to control me. So obviously growing up in a controlling situation, right? When you make your husband a meal and you present it to him, it should be coming from love and compassion and I've made this because I love you, and
right.
we're gonna enjoy this meal together. And I've been doing that for the past however long now, since you've been working and going to uni and life is hectic. I've been cooking, plating and presenting, right? But I've been doing it from a place of joy and enjoying that and wanting to do that to serve you, rather than feeling like, oh my gosh, I have to do this. I'm the servant of this house and life is so unfair and all this kind of stuff. Does that make sense?
But I think we were having a conversation. We kind of digressed here, but we're having this conversation. We're talking about trauma, so it's all linked. But we're talking about the idea of how these gender roles have some up because of society and the social constructs that we have, where it's like this role is more important than this role, and so if you're doing this role more, it means you've got more value in the house, and therefore power and control is up here with you. Whereas actually that's not true, because in terms of the family structure, structural family theory again.
Mark's theory is all coming out, by the way. If you would like to know, he's now studying systemic approaches to family therapy.
Yeah, systemic therapy. But anyway, so in terms of structural family, so it seems as though the power is with one of the groups and members of that family, but that's not the case. Or specific roles in the family have more value. No, actually, when you think about the family as a whole, when you think about the children, when you think about their development and all of that stuff.
And I think also it's about what society. Now we're really getting into gender roles, and it's a totally different topic. Yeah. But I think in terms of gender roles, for me, gender roles were linked to trauma.
But so that's the point I was getting at, which is in that moment, you were in that role of this is of less value.
Yeah.
And so the power's gone to you because...
But not even of less value. It was of thinking back to my own parenting and the reasons why those things were done. So for example, the reasons why dinner was on the table, or the reasons why the shoes were on someone's feet, or the reasons why the house was kept clean. It wasn't because this is done out of love and we're doing this to help our family and we do this together and you do this and I do this and we meet each other halfway, from a place of equality. It was from a place of fear and a place of, okay, we need to make sure that things are in check. We need to make sure the house is clean. We need to make sure this is done, because so-and-so will, pick up a fuss. Okay. So for me, that is why when then coming into the marriage, I struggled, because I was like, am I doing this because I'm doing this out of love and I'm happy in this space? Or am I doing this because I feel like I'm being controlled and I feel like Daddy's going to kick up a fuss if it's not done? Do you know what I mean? And obviously then having Mark, who's so free and easygoing, he's just like, okay.
I was like, go, girl. I see you trying to, stand up for yourself here. I don't know what that's all about. But anyway, I'm not sure what you're fighting against, because nobody's fighting against you. But anyway, let's hear a little bit more about that stuff that you were talking about.
And then I think one time you did say to me, you said, that African man you keep talking about, it's not me, it's your dad. And that was like a real pivotal moment, because in all honesty, before, I knew there was domestic abuse when I was a child, but some of the stuff that we did, you get so used to the things that you do in your family that you think that they're normal. And then it's only those moments when you now start to take inventory, you look back in your life and you think, that wasn't normal.
Yeah,
that's
culture.
That was like a family culture.
Yeah.
But it wasn't normal and it wasn't helpful.
Yeah. Normative theory.
Oh, there we go. Another theory.
And here I was thinking, I don't get university, it's so complicated. And we started having this conversation. It's like
all coming out. And so, guys, why are we sharing this with you today? We're not sharing this with you to
just for the sake of
out our traumas,
no.
But because it might be helpful to somebody who might be having irrational thoughts or struggling to regulate emotions. A simple thing like somebody asking you to make a cup of tea sends you into a rage, and you don't know what's going on. It's time to take inventory. It's time to look back and think, oh, what is this linked to? And the reason I'm also saying this is one of the people who's been viewing the videos said, it's only when you said how you and Mark pause and you think, what is this behavior? Where is it stemming from? That she...
Narrative theory. That's called, narrative theory.
Narrative, there you go.
Yeah. Honestly, my lecturers listen, they'll be so impressed. Like, why do you look so confused in the lectures then?
So, right, now she does that. Instead of just going through her day and just being frustrated at things and just kicking off at different things, she stops and goes, wait, where's this coming from? And she says that actually her life has been unfolding beforehand. All these things are coming out. So guys, word of warning, if you're going to go on this journey, it's going to be revealing. You're gonna come across a lot of things, and make sure that you've got somebody by your side that will be there to support you.
I was just thinking about something you were talking about then. For me to be able to process all of the emotions and actually to have the space to say, oh, I wonder what this is. And Bethany, you kind of touched on this in terms of, Mark's the easygoing guy who just kind of lets things go. The trauma that I had to work on was ego, because before I got saved, I used to have a lot of ego. And ego was the thing that got me through many doors, actually, and got me into a lot of cool spaces and stuff like that. But then when I got saved, it had the opposite effect. And I think over time I had to work through that and get to a point where actually I was able to relinquish the ego and actually completely let it go. Like, I don't want to have this level of control from a place of being egotistical and, that whole
But also, I wonder where that ego came from, because if you think back to when you were a child, believe it or not, guys, Mark was the most timid little boy you had ever seen. Up his thumb and cry and so
I did used to cry a lot, and I think that ego it came from a place of actually trying to support other people, because the only reason I came out, I was able to become my verbose self, was because I was becoming an advocate. I was becoming the person that would speak up for the other people, that, the voices that were unheard. And so from there, it just grew this boldness, which became ego, because it's like, well, now notice me, here I am, da-da-da.
And then you were kind of almost untouchable then.
Yeah.
People are scared of him. No, legit. You gave people trauma. You actually gave people trauma, because he would tease people, he would make laughing stocks of people and all this kind of stuff. Believe it or not, guys, this is before salvation. I think salvation is necessary. I think we need to plug in.
It is true. It is.
Yeah. So this is crucial. We're just plugging, guys. Here we go.
Notice how Beth could concentrate then. She was like,
I couldn't concentrate. I'm like,
to go in that, but
our recording device was about to switch off, guys. So anywho, we're here, and we're good, we're live. And we hope that you're enjoying this session, and please give us feedback if you are. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, so you can continue to watch more content. Share with your friends if this is helping you. Another thing that just at the beginning of this year, when the pastor was talking about trauma, he was talking about the title of his sermon was "Did you forget? Have you forgotten?
Have you forgotten?
Have you forgotten?" It was really, really powerful, so simple, really, really
as
effective.
always, very simple.
And he was talking about spiritual amnesia, and he used the sermon that Brother Branham preached about spiritual amnesia, and he said there was a quotation that said, you can get spiritual amnesia, and by spiritual amnesia we're talking about when you forget who you are as a child of God, right? When you forget your place as a child of God, and you can get spiritual amnesia by trauma. So when traumatic things happen to you, that can cause you to have these trauma responses that we've been talking about, and you then have stress and nervousness, and then when that develops into nervousness, you then have all this fear and anxiety. He said sometimes, especially if a trauma is linked to a specific person, maybe that person's at church, maybe you see that person all the time, they're in your family, whatever, wherever, you then start to avoid that person. And when you're now avoiding that person, every time you see them, you flinch, and it's like, oh, and you're now getting to a place of depression, because sometimes you want to hide away, sometimes you don't want to come to wherever that place is where that person is going to be. And then you start to worry about everything, because you're thinking like, is that person going to be there? Is this going to happen to me again? Am I going to be safe? Because your safety has been compromised. And so, in human nature, you're going to go right back to your primitive state of, I don't feel safe and I need to protect myself. And so everything else is going to shut down because you're trying to protect yourself. And I feel like that has been happening to me over the past couple of years. Where
you did go to childhood trauma.
100%, like 100%, I locked myself away because I'd experienced different traumas from different people. It's like, imagine somebody I trust like Mark, right? So with my heart, like,
thank you,
love him to death, trust him so much. I'm not saying Mark has done anything to me, but other people have, who I've really, really trusted. And then they've done things which has shocked me. Like, literally, when like the rug is just pulled from beneath your feet, or like the world just opens up and you just feel like it could swallow you. Like, there has been stuff that's happened in the past couple of years where I have felt like I wish the world could just swallow me up. And it has been from people like that I love and trust, like Mark, and it has shocked me. And I didn't realize that had given me trauma, because I always thought of trauma as like something that's happened in the past. But I never thought, oh, there's actually current trauma. There's actually stuff that's happening now in our adult life that is actually giving me trauma, and that's causing these responses. And so I would just shut people off and go into this like box. Okay, I don't trust you, so I'm just going to stop talking to you. I'm just going to stay in my little corner. You stay in your little corner, and we'll be safe like that. But what I didn't realize is it was now affecting my whole being. And even just the joy that I had, like coming into church as well, like being anywhere. I didn't want to fellowship. I didn't want to go to people's houses. Just being overprotective of myself and protecting myself from being hurt. So when he preached that sermon, it really got to me, and I was like, oh my gosh. And then the other thing he said after worry is also, another thing is being caught between two opinions. And he was saying that as well can cause spiritual amnesia. And he was saying sometimes, for me, the being caught between two opinions was being caught between my social work values and my Christian values. And it was actually my friend.
We've got to say thank you to some of our amazing friends that we have. People who are always able just to level up with you.
So my dearest and nearest sister Ida, she pointed it out one time. We were having this conversation, and I was talking about the traumas that have happened to me, even with church folk. And I was like, I don't understand how these church folk can be allowed to do this. They need to be called to justice. Like, justice is one of my biggest values, right? If you break justice for me, I'm just like, nah, mate, I'm cutting you. Like, justice needs to be served.
Relationship severed.
Yeah, relationship severed for sure.
Grace, what's that? Never heard of that. Mercy, who? Mercy, who? No. So
I was having that conversation with my friend, and I was really losing myself in this. I was like, this is not fair. Justice needs to be served.
Visceral level.
Like, I was so angry. And she just went, Bethel, I'm really worried, because it feels like your social work values and your Christian values are just all meshed up in one. And that really struck me. And I was just like, oh my gosh. Like, that was the answer. Because you know what, guys, for a long time, I've been saying, I feel like I'm losing my mind. I feel like I'm losing my mind. And people just thought I was just saying it. But I felt so conflicted in my mind. I was starting to like wonder who I was. And I was starting to think like, I don't know who Bethel is anymore, And it was then when
you've got a passport, driving license.
Remember when I said somebody said my name, and I was like, who's Bethel? Guys, it was real. So after your dad preached that message about trauma and worry and nervousness, and then being caught between two opinions, it kind of all,
that was the idea.
Kind of all came together, and I was like, oh my gosh, like being caught between two opinions. And that has just taken me to a whole place where I don't even know who I am anymore. And so before, the way we would work with trauma is like, okay, we know this thing has come up, we pray about it, find it in the scriptures, what do the scriptures say about it, and then we find our answer, right? But now when I was caught between the social work values and the Christian values, it's like, okay, well, I know that I experienced this childhood trauma, so what does social work say about it? What are the theories that I can apply to it? You know, what is the way that social work can
And hang
solve
on,
it?
church needs to fix up.
Well, yeah, at some points I'm like, church needs to fix up because this isn't safe and this isn't, you know, this is trauma inducing. So yeah, so I've been on a huge journey, and since that moment of that realization, I really thank God for that, because I feel like something really changed. And I called his dad and I was like, his dad is the pastor. And I was like, you need to pray for me and we need to talk. I've got a lot of things that I've been going through that I've just not talked about.
I think we've got to be grateful to all the pastors who take the time to actually sit down with their sheep and talk to them and get them through some really difficult situations.
Yeah,
we appreciate the fact that obviously you was able to take the time out and to come out of that conversation with you, because you were really stuck between a rock and a hard
so
place.
stuck. Yeah, and I think like if you're listening and you're going through something similar, especially if you're in the medical field or psychiatry or any psychology, therapy, social work, and you're having conflicted values with your Christian beliefs, I think this is something probably again you need to think about. It's absolutely fine to have knowledge, but sometimes if knowledge overtakes what you believe, then it can really get you into a place where you feel lost and you don't know where you really stand. And there's that scripture that I'm reminded of, which is a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. Because you don't know, you're like, okay, the Bible says this, but social work says this, you know, and you're constantly like that. And that's how I was for such a long time, that it gave me nervousness and I didn't know what was the right thing to do. But since that conversation, I've been more, I have an issue. What does the word say about this? You know, and that has actually gave me a lot more stability. So I've been a lot happier in myself.
So coming back to the tea situation.
Yes. Where am I now with the tea situation? Mark, what do you think? In the past couple of weeks, where am I now with the tea situation?
Honestly, Beth has made some significant progress, which is astounding to say the least. I think the fact that you mentioned about how you were stuck between two opinions, that always, you could tell at the time, always used to kind of influence your decision making. Because part of it was like, oh, and I probably should, I want to, and probably should, but on the other hand, it's like, well, actually, hang on, there's this theory and that, so exactly. I don't know if I really should, feminism, because by giving into that, then it's good, you know,
all that stuff.
Yeah, but now you've got to a place where actually it's from the heart. So you're listening to you more. Like, this is who I really am, and I'm used to giving. And this is about giving freely, not this kind of like, oh, I think we call it reciprocity or something like that, where it's like, oh, you do something and I'll do something for you.
Yeah.
Because there isn't that level of trust to say you're just going to do this for nothing.
And also giving and not thinking like, oh, I'm just being taken advantage of here. But actually giving because I'm like, well, he's working really hard too, and that's how he's giving in the situation. You know, and I'm the better cook anyway.
Oh, shit. No, that's true. That's just fact. I mean, I'm a close second, because I learned from the best. And you do know, as they always say, one day the student becomes
a master.
It's a master.
But
one of these days I will become the Zen.
Mark hasn't been in the kitchen so long that he actually did. What were we asking?
Hang on, like, I know where the kitchen is. I haven't been. He was
like, what should I put in the chicken? I'm like,
what? Oh,
like,
wow.
Chicken spice. He's like, but where's the chicken spice? I'm like, in the cupboard. He's like, I can't find it. I'm like, did you open the cupboard? As soon as I open the cupboard, it's like right there. I'm like, shows how long you haven't been cooking for.
True that. Honestly, I just couldn't see the spice. I was looking at it all over the cupboard. I couldn't find it.
That's hilarious. But yeah, so yeah, that's the journey we've been on at the moment.
And I guess I'm thinking about my own traumas. I think a lot of the stuff that happened when I was younger. So, for example, you know, I was going to say being academically deficient. That's not the word.
Academically deficient. No,
that just doesn't sound right. Hilarious. But when I was younger, I hadn't learned the way, figured out the best way for me to learn. And so I was going to the education system not knowing how to learn and not being able to learn much and you know, get much from that. So it just gave me this kind of what's the word? I had a really like strong lack of self-esteem and stuff like that. But I think coming into the relationship, a place where I felt safe, a place where I felt at ease, and not having the ego and not having to worry about I'm trying to do this so I can, make a statement of I am the man and I'm the brains and I'm this, that, and the other. I think there were moments where maybe that trauma, because Bethel's incredibly intelligent. And I don't just mean like that much. I mean like she remembers everything from like primary school to secondary school like it was yesterday. I'm like, mate,
is that intelligence or is that just a good memory?
Both, because I mean, mathematicians, if you've got a brain that remembers everything, you don't have to calculate because you just remember it.
True.
So that can be intelligence. But intelligence anyway is not a measure of how much you can remember or how much you know. It's actually how you apply it. So yes, she was intelligent in that way academically. I also have my own intelligence, but I'm talking here specifically academically intelligence. And I don't think it made me feel inferior in any way, but I think it was just more of actually just being aware of the fact that there are so many other things that you're good at, and I have to be okay with that. I guess the trauma was probably maybe in some circumstances where I'm like, oh, I didn't even realize that was the situation. Oh, right. Wow, how did my brain get that so quick? Oh.
Like what?
I was thinking about so there was a time when I don't think we were applying for a holiday. We were just talking to these people about the holiday thing. And I hadn't got to the place where they were trying to sell us this holiday scheme. Well, I was trying to think what they call those.
Oh, timeshares.
Timeshares and stuff like that, because it's not a concept I was familiar with. And I remember them talking through it and they say, you get to go on this holiday, this holiday, this holiday. And then
it was actually a loan.
At some point, Beth was like, hang on, this is a loan.
Yeah.
And I was like, how did you figure that out? And I think it's because they started talking about, the interest rate and stuff like that and everything else. But I hadn't quite got there.
And this is before we bought our house. And I said, this is a loan.
Yeah, that was pretty.
Because they were like, by the time you pay it back. And I was like, what do you mean pay it back?
Yeah.
I was like, this isn't a membership. This is a loan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
So stuff like that. So being comfortable with that. I think that's a lot of stuff that would give most males trauma and have them acting. Not true, and have them acting out of character. So just for trying to assert themselves, just to try and assert themselves and say, actually, no, I should be the one who's more intelligent, who understands the numbers and gets all the things and everything else. You start to act out of character. So
that's good.
So for me, I've just had to learn to actually hang on. She's good at some of the stuff, and she's amazing at what she does, and so I should be okay with that. Not have to try and because I'm the man, then I need to.
I think that's something that you've done really well in our relationship. Is like just.
Oh, thank you, Bethel.
Thank you. It's just being okay with the fact that I am good at stuff and just asking me, Bethel, what do you think about this?
I thought of a really good joke.
What?
But people just get over. But I said the reason I'm brown is because of all the brownie points I get.
That's what we call a mark joke. Tumblebee.
Oh, that was so good. But anyway.
Anywho. But yeah, you've done really well in that. And the thing is, I think I also acknowledge you. I mean, there's things that you are amazing at that I can't do. And I think it was just about finding your footing. I think with creatives, because me and you are both creatives, right? And I think, your whole situation was totally different in that you didn't have leave to remain, which is another thing that we can talk about on a different video. And so you couldn't finish your course at university. I believe if you had finished your graphic design, your career path would have been totally different. But it took a minute for you to get that status, and then you could go back to uni. And I remember at that time when we were deciding, so what are you going to go and study? What are you good at? Where are your strengths? And that was kind of the moment where you really started to shine, because you're like, oh, I really love this and I'm so passionate about this. And you found that course that you did, and then you started coming out. And I was blessed enough to have parents who did actually support me in my dreams and allow me to go and study drama, which most parents would never do. Like
my dad supported me to go and do graphic design, so that's great.
That's it.
So our parents are thinking like that.
Yeah.
But just thinking back to traumas, I mean, there's been some traumas at church, but I was trying to think of how they would have affected us in the household. I think one of the things that happens, especially when you've got trauma from elsewhere, or where you both experience the same trauma, sometimes it could just be a downer. Like you come home and you just think, wow, our world is collapsing.
Yeah. Like our world as we know it.
The pillars that we knew around us have all kind of fallen, and all structures are just caving in, and so it doesn't feel like there's some safe, secure spaces, and so it could really just make the whole house feel a bit grey.
But I think in some of the traumas as well, guys, there is also overcoming as well. We're not saying that you're going to have trauma and you're never going to overcome it. No, we're saying you can overcome this.
This is the point I was coming to, which is I think one of the things I remember the most about my childhood, all the trauma I experienced up until a certain point, I vividly recall one day, and I told you this and I told many people, where I don't know where it came from, but I guess I was probably sick and tired of being a victim and falling victim to all of these different things that are happening around me. And I hope this is relevant, and I hope it helps someone.
Yeah.
But I think you're talking about being caught between two decisions, or and then losing yourself in the process, not knowing who you are. I got to a place I was sick and tired of just being in a space of just not knowing, low self-esteem because victim of circumstances and situation.
Yeah.
I said, actually, no, do you know what? I didn't know that that's what I was doing, but I stood in front of the mirror and I talked to myself. I talked through every single one of those situations. Most people don't know, but when I was younger, because our families were into professional hunting, so they would actually go and bid for animals in game parks, and once you win that animal you have to pay a large sum of money to actually go. So for example, a game reserve wants to release 3 lions because the numbers of the lions have outgrown the population of all the other. I'm kind of digressing here.
Go on.
But the point I was trying to get to is that there's one of my friends who by accident I shot him by mistake. And that traumatized me because at that stage, I didn't really get the level of support that I thought I'd get from the adults. It was more of, oh my goodness, how did you do that? And so having to deal with that and overcome that in that moment, I stood there and I talked to myself about it. And that really helped me because when I left that moment,
say you shot him by mistake, he's alive and well.
Oh yeah. It was an air rifle, by the way, not like
It was an accident.
And we were playing in the garden because
kids should not play with guns.
Yeah, so because we had access to the guns and air rifle, and we were playing, and then mistake, and then the next thing is in the hospital, and then all sorts of stuff was happening. And we're still friends even to today, and he forgave me, which is nice of him. But yeah, so I had to deal with that trauma of how do you get over that situation, given that nobody actually gave me any support. And then
did people kind of treat you like you did it vindictively, or did they?
No, I think it was the lack of empathy around the situation.
So how you would feel.
I was like, what were you guys doing? I mean, come on, dude, why would you do that? And it's like, well, actually, no, I wasn't trying to. It was actually just an accident. And I think I was probably about, I don't know, maybe I want to say 12. I could have been younger. I don't know. I can't remember. I think I was probably younger, but anyway, I know we're digressing, but this is relevant because of trauma and how they can affect you long term. And so coming into our relationship, because I had freed all of that trauma, I didn't have any restrictions in terms of how much I was willing to give. So in the moments where Bethel would act in a weird way, or because Bethel comes from a family or a background where you ask for whatever you want. So for example, Mark, can you make me a cup of tea, please? Mark, can you go upstairs and get the whatever I left in the drawer and bring it down here for me? I'm like, huh? We sat next to each other and you asking me to go upstairs. What was that? But in there were moments where then I was able to give, because I didn't see that as kind of like I'm trying to control you. It was just, oh, okay. I mean, I guess she's asking, so if I can, I will. But if I can't, I'm going to tell her no, I can't. And there isn't anything about trauma that's linked to that.
Yeah. No,
sorry, long explanation.
We hope that our little stories are helping people. I would highly recommend that if you are a part of a church, you speak to your pastor. If there has been something that has traumatized you from childhood, current, whatever it is, talk to your husband or your partner, boyfriend, girlfriend about it. Talk to somebody that you trust and somebody that will will take that information sensitively and wisely, and will not just air it to the rest of the world, because that will just give you more trauma. So that's really, really important. If you're not part of a church and you're watching this, maybe you might want to seek some counseling or some therapy about it. You need to speak to somebody. Sitting on trauma and just dealing with it by yourself is not going to be a good idea. Like you want to make sure that you're processing things that you've been through so that it doesn't dictate your life.
Because I think sometimes people aren't aware of the habit patterns that they've formed as a result of the trauma.
Yes.
So sometimes people act a certain way just because of the trauma, and
they
you're
don't
not
know.
aware of it. You know, until
say,
somebody
I'm
points
over
out and says, do you know that every time somebody says this or something like this happens, or
you do this.
You do this.
Yeah.
So, I didn't know.
And that's about being self-aware, isn't it? That's about being more self-aware and actually, is it reflexivity? Where you're looking at your actions and thinking, why am I behaving like that?
Systemic theory.
Why am I behaving like that? And so I think it's really, really crucial, because if you don't deal with your trauma, especially if you haven't had kids, or even if you have had kids, you might be bringing your trauma and transferring it onto them and to whoever. This goes even if you're in a relationship or you're not yet in a relationship. Could trauma be preventing you from being in a relationship or sustaining a relationship? And we've talked again in some of our other videos of how there was a pattern of every 3 months with me that I would get bored of Mark, and Mark had to find out what's that all about.
And have you noticed every 3 months this is what happens with you?
And I didn't know until he was like, this is, and then I go back, okay, this is linked to a trauma, this is linked to this is linked, so our behavior is all linked to something, guys. But there is overcoming power.
Absolutely.
And you don't have to live like
Absolutely.
that.
There's definitely a way out. And I think one of the greatest things that we've learned through this whole process, especially as Beth was saying, after you've become aware of it, there's also the part where you have to play a part in addressing it.
Yes.
It might, because sometimes some of these things will reoccur, and then you have to keep working to overcome it.
Yes, exactly. And I loved, we've been watching The Chosen as well, guys. Oh my gosh, if you haven't watched The Chosen, I am going to highly 100% recommend it. It's on Amazon and it's on Netflix. Watch The Chosen. And just watching Mary's story and how Jesus found her when she was in the red corner, whatever they call it. So Mary was a prostitute in the Bible, and he finds her and he just, oh my gosh, it's just amazing the way he just loves her the way she is, but actually the way she truly is, and tells her that whatever this life isn't for her. And what I love about The Chosen, it shows that actually Mary didn't want to be in that position. It was because she had been through trauma. She'd been abused by one of the Roman soldiers, and that's how she ended up getting into prostitution, because of the trauma. She then became possessed by all of these different spirits, and was just intense for her. And so he now comes and sets her free. But it also shows the struggle that actually Mary didn't just, that wasn't, the first time that she went through that. She then also had a moment where she
kind of relapsed,
and she's like getting these flashbacks, and she ends up going back, and she feels unworthy, and she feels like she can't do it. And Jesus is like, I didn't ask you to do anything. I just asked you to give me your heart.
Wow.
And that's exactly what Jesus is asking us to do. He's not asking us to fix ourselves. He's asking us to say, Lord, here's the broken part in me that needs fixing.
And I was going to say, I think from the other side, there's a really beautiful point actually, Beth, that you make. From the other side, I think if you're that person who's experiencing trauma and you're then traumatizing the other person, so actually I'm talking to the person that feels traumatized, the person that things are being projected onto them, you're going to need a lot of grace. And where that comes from, prayer, just being able to take that to God and say, honestly, authentically, Lord, this is where I'm at. I'm really struggling to deal with this and struggling to understand this situation, how I could, be supportive in the situation. And I think also being able to have that conversation with your spouse to say, look, I don't quite understand things as they are, but I'm willing to learn. And I'm willing to be there just to listen, to hear, and maybe together we can work this out and get to know exactly what it is that's affecting you in the moment. Because I think until we feel safe, that we can trust the person whom we're going to give that information to, and they will listen without any judgment or condemnation of any sort. Sometimes that process might be, you won't open up enough.
But equally, I also feel like if you're the person who has been traumatized and you are the person doing the transference, having been in that place myself, it's not fair. Like, it's not okay for you to just say, well, I was traumatized as a child and therefore This is me, and that's who I am. No.
And I think that's one of the things I love about Beth. I know some of the conversations weren't exactly comfortable, weren't exactly easygoing, but we were able to go to that place, and then we were willing to
it's painful. It's painful. It's a painful process, and that is why most people don't go through it, because they're like, oh my gosh, I have to look in. I have to look at that nasty part of me that isn't nice, that part of me that I don't want to show people, and I have to own it and I have to take responsibility for it. And that is what you need to do. If you're a person who's been through trauma and now that's affecting your behavior, and maybe you're angry all the time, or maybe you're frustrated, maybe you're treating your spouse like dirt, maybe you're transferring it onto your kids and you're yelling at them. Like, you need to take inventory, and you need to be like, hold on, this is a me issue, and I need to look into myself, and I need to work on this, because it's not good. It's not okay.
And I think one of the things about trauma is, good point there. Another thing about trauma is, for the most part, we feel guilty for being a victim of it, or we feel guilty when actually we're victims of other situations, circumstances. I'm not talking about the transference part, but I'm just talking about the part where we've experienced it from elsewhere, and then we carry that burden and the guilt and whatever, and then now we start projecting.
Yeah,
but
I think that can also link to, like, if you've had anything to do with sexual abuse and things like that, where you might feel like, oh, was I a part of that trauma? Did I incite that? Let me tell you now that you have never been a part of that trauma. If you've been abused, if somebody has taken advantage of you, it's not your fault. And so there is that element of feeling guilty, and there is that element of needing to forgive yourself and let go of yourself, because you may have made yourself feel guilty and made yourself feel responsible. And you need to relinquish that responsibility, because that wasn't you. That wasn't on you.
Because guilt can make you act in one of two ways. You can either act very remorseful and try to find ways to,
or very angry,
overcome it, or the other is you can become very angry.
That's true. They normally say if somebody's cheating on somebody, and they normally get very angry because, oh, in case I get found out, so they get really angry, and it's a really weird dynamic. But
but our prayer is that through all of this talking and these stories that we've told you, that some way you found a thread of, okay, there is a way out of this. And it might mean that I might have to put myself in the stand and really take a look inward. One, it's not my fault. Two, there is a way that I can actually bring all this stuff out. And three, I need to find safe people I can speak to. And four, hopefully, I can get all of it out to a place where I can start to see for what it is, and then be able to actually work through it.
Guys, we hope you loved the session. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Comment. The last video we did got so many comments. We were so happy, and thank you so much for that. Share it with anybody that you might feel has been traumatized or is going through trauma, or might just need this extra support. And we are so blessed to have all of you who have subscribed already. And we just pray that you're going to have a good night, a good week, a good year, a prosperous year. Free in 23. Let's be trauma free.
Free in 23, I like that.
In 23. That's my new slogan. My slogan has been free in 23. Free from everything. Free from the trauma, free from the shame, free from the guilt, anger, whatever it is.
And as we go, you can tell we're church folks, as we go. There's a song that we're going to sing you. You're saying it at the beginning, but I'll just sing the first part of the verse, because it simply says, standing at the door, you're waiting patiently, you're knocking at my heart, I answer the call. As dark as it may be, so from the past life that I've lived, to go through every door and cleanse it all out. In your word, you said that I could be whole. Even change me and fill me with your Holy Ghost. But how do I know that I can trust and let go? I'm afraid of what you find behind these doors. So I reach for the door. So I reach for the door and open it and welcome you, Jesus, today. Yeah, you go through every part of my heart. Yeah. All that you find, Lord, take it away. And for you, that's joy, that's love, that's peace, that's comfort, that's everything good that you deserve. See you again next time.
See you next week, 8:30 p.m. Ciao.